97, a great year for music. So many to choose from, and I went for this one. I'm not sure I made the right decision, but it's a great track. We'll come back to that. Hello, the world. Hello, Jason Isaacs. Hello, people who are interested in 1992 and 1997. Yes, so that was White Town. Fantastic one-hit wonder from 97. Great year for music. We won't talk about the Spice Girls. Anyway, we need to look at 97. We're going to look at 97 first by looking at 1992 because everything that went wrong for the Labour Party went right for them in 97. Everything that went right for the Conservatives went wrong for them in 97. 92, definitely a win for default. These guys were on their last legs. But Labour was still not trusted by that new and Thatcher-created middle class. They were not prepared to chuck in their lot with Labour, not yet anyway. So it's not enough for the Conservatives to be rubbish. They were pretty rubbish in 92. There needs to be an electable alternative. And in 1992, Labour was not perceived to be electable. When we come to 97, as you can see here from the evidence, that was very, very different. 97, the Labour Party was very, very electable. And we've got a huge majority there, both in terms of vote and in terms of outcome. So, how did we get to that? Well, we need to look at the context, and in the short term, we have to look at the reputation that the Conservatives had traditionally had for economic competence. And that had been torpedoed utterly by Black Wednesday. Black Wednesday in September of 1992, you'll remember the election was in May of 1992. Now, back in 1992, I was a budding banker, and I just so happened to be on the fixed income floor at Goldman Sachs on that day. And it was pretty amazing, even as a wet behind the ears guy who really didn't know what he's doing. Nothing's changed there except perhaps slightly less wet behind the ears. It was an incredible thing to see. There was billions of pounds, billions of dollars flying around the room. Interest rates going up and down. And that day, many people made, not just at Goldman but around the world, made enough money such that they'd never had to work again. Sadly, not me. Hence, here I am. But it was an incredible thing, and it did tremendous damage to the Conservative reputation for economic competence. The ironic thing was that after that, the economy actually bounced back. Being outside the ERM allowed us to trade our way out of a recession. And yeah, a lot of the economic prosperity that followed into 96 and 97 was in large part due to us being outside the ERM. But I'm getting into that deep dive, and that's not really what I wanted to do. The point is that the damage was done. Where once upon a time the Conservatives have been seen to be a safe pair of hands in terms of the economy, now that was done. And the Conservative Party was hopelessly divided over, what was it again? Oh yeah, that's right, Europe. Well, just as well we don't have to worry about that anymore. Anyway, in the 1990s, the Conservative Party was split in half by Maastricht. Maastricht was the stage of that stage of the expansion of the European project, and in order to get the Maastricht vote through Parliament, Major was forced to turn it into a vote of confidence. Again, no one wouldn't see that happening now, would we? But there we go. So in 1994, Major was desperately trying to hold together a party that was struggling, or was desperately trying to tear itself apart, I suppose. And I'm going to come to the fact that the Conservatives are completely out of ideas, and nowhere was that more clearly demonstrated than the Back to Basics campaign. This was announced at the Conservative Party conference in 1993, but the Conservatives did not actually explain what it meant, and so it was left for the media to fill the blanks. And the media decided that what Back to Basics was essentially a campaign on moral virtue. And it didn't take long, of course, for them to find various Conservative MPs who, much like human beings all around the world, were perhaps not as morally virtuous as they claimed to be in private, as they claimed to be, in the public domain. And the Conservative Party was just pilloried and dragged through the mud, and it was not happy. It was not pleasant, actually. It really wasn't very pleasant at all. But again, if you are going to toss that unexploded bomb into the party, then the Conservative Party really has itself to blame on that front. It was a monumental error. Anyway, so that's back to basics, didn't work. And all that did was it made the Conservative, all these three things in combination did was make it look tired, and particularly make it look like it was ready for a change. And perhaps the referendum party was an indication that change was in the air. This wasn't really worth any seats, but it certainly took a few points off them. Yeah, much worse was to come on that front. But what we've clearly seen here is that we have a sense of fatigue, both government fatigue and voter fatigue. The government was completely out of ideas. They'd been running out of ideas in '92, and then having blown up in Black Wednesday, it kind of made a mess of their economic plans. Anyway, they were fundamentally out of ideas. They were out of steam. They were out of energy, and the public were aware of this as well. So even though the economy wasn't doing too badly, people were ready to get rid of the Conservatives, and frankly, sometimes it looked like the Conservatives were quite keen to get out the door themselves. But none of that would have been relevant if New Labour had not been a viable alternative. And here they came along, they were preaching ideological revolution. Of course, the irony is that most of that revolution was taking what Thatcherism has presented and redressing it and remarketing it and adding a couple of bits on, specifically social justice and multiculturalism. But this was the real genius of this was that because they cherry picked the very best of the Labour policy, of the Conservative policies, there was not very much really that the Conservatives could do to challenge these policies. The very best ones were the ones they'd taken, and then they'd added new and pretty good ideas to them as well. So this percolated all the way through. We had a leader in John Major whose authority was undermined by the economic malfeasance of '92, and his party was divided, and he'd had enough. He was exhausted. And you can see it in his campaign. He was sick and tired of trying to hold together this fundamentally divided party. Blair and Brown, on the other hand, well, they just did everything right. We had the young, telegenic and articulate Blair representing the public face of Labour, and then behind him we had Brown, the slightly less young, slightly less telegenic, but still very articulate, intellectual powerhouse, if you will, of New Labour. And between the two of them, they presented an incredibly competent, forward-looking, and very, very effective package. So again, everything that's going wrong over here is going right over here, and that went all the way through the campaign. This could not really have gone worse. We had very, very negative campaigning in 1992. Don't forget that. It wasn't so much vote Conservative, we're great. It was more don't vote Labour because they're going to tax the hell out of you. Well, again, the Labour policy, which was taking Conservative financial plans and tarting them up a bit, meant that they couldn't turn around and say that. The Conservatives couldn't lay a finger on on New Labour because the campaign was very, very good. So what they came up with was this, and the public recognised this as the last throw of the dice from a party that was just completely out of options. This is a really, really lame ad hominem attack, and the Conservatives really didn't think this one through, and the public just went, no, come on, you've got to do better than that, guys. And it just didn't work. So we have a bad campaign, we have a massive imbalance in the leadership, but let's look at the Labour campaign. Everything that was going wrong with the Conservatives was going right with Labour. We had a new way of running controls, running these things. Whereas the Conservative Party was sort of tired and vapid, what we have here is a campaign that was run much more along American lines. The Labour Party had looked very carefully at what Bill Clinton was doing, and they introduced a very, very tightly controlled election team. If you get the chance, have a look at some of the stuff from Labour in '96, '97, and look out for John Prescott. He appears in a lot of these videos on YouTube, and he's really not very happy about what's going on. You can see that everything he does and joining in with all of the forced bonhomie is done through gritted teeth because he hated all of this. But he had to suck it up. Old Labour was told, look, you guys have been losing elections. If you want to achieve any sort of reform, the first thing you have to do is win the elections. We will win the elections, and then we will work with you to achieve social justice. And Old Labour signed up for this, and so we have the vanguard, if you will, of New Labour seeking to achieve power so that then the Labour Party can deliver profound social reform. Anyway, when you look at John Major, when you look at John Prescott in these videos, you can see that he's still is not entirely 100% signed up with this. But the rest of the campaign was very slick and professional. It might not look it, perhaps, again, from those YouTube videos from '97, but in the context of what the Conservatives were doing, and certainly in the context of what went before, then this was entirely new, and it redefined exactly how people in the UK expected to see a campaign run. And central to that is media management. Now, I'm going to come to this in a second. The critical point to understand about media management is that again, the Labour Party was learning from the mistakes of the Conservatives. The Conservatives had introduced back to basics and then just said, well, we don't know what it means, you guys decide. And what that meant, that message was not lost on the Labour Party. In fact, they turned it around and they said, look, it may be that you can't control events. It's evident now that you can't control events, but what you can do is control the way that they are presented by the media. You can't control what happens, but you can control what somebody says up to a point. At least you can try to. So rather than letting the media do their own thing, the Labour Party under the new management sought to establish very, very tight control of the message, very, very tight control of who said what, who was allowed to speak and what they were allowed to say. And they established what was called a rapid rebuttal unit, such that if the media came out with something or the Conservatives came out with something, bang, immediately that response was ready. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a couple of slides, possibly in the next presentation, because there's no way I'm going to get through all of this in 15 minutes. But let's just talk a little bit about the message. The message, again, was very, very simple. We are not going to tax you. They knew that they were clattered by the tax thing in '92, so they said, look, we are going to uphold the same spending program that the Conservatives have been doing, so see how economically responsible we are. We are going to do, we're not going to tax you. You're not going to hit us with that double whammy in Labour's tax bombshell. But we're also going to give you something else. We're going to give you education, education, education. We're going to cut down class sizes. We're going to build new schools. And we're going to reduce NHS waiting lists. And we're going to bin Clause 4. Right. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Clause 4. And then we'll get into the next presentation. Now, I'm not going to say, and it would be insane to say, that New Labour won the election in 1997 because of Clause 4. But Clause 4 was essentially in the party's DNA. This was what they did. And what the party did, certainly old Labour did, was that it was committed to the common ownership of the means of production, distribution and exchange. That, for those of you who know their socialism, is essentially a definition of what socialism is. That is gone over here. This is just rhetoric. This is just empty rhetoric. This is just words. But the thing is that people can look into this and they can see what they want to see. So old Labour can look in this and they can see trade unions and cooperative societies and say, oh, well, maybe it does represent some sort of continuity with the left. And New Labour can look at it and say, well, this is all about potential and all about working together and other sort of vapid, inane truisms. But what it doesn't have, what this does not have, is a commitment to the common ownership of the means of production. And again, you've got to think about what that means for Labour's DNA. It does not have socialist DNA anymore. It is not going to nationalise it. It's not going to take back British Telecom. It's not going to take back all those council houses. Instead, what it's going to do is it's just going to let everybody work together in some sort of bizarre way. So the election didn't hinge on Clause 4, but everything that happened in the election did follow from the changes in Clause 4. Don't get sucked into it in the exam. That's a really deep dive. But you just need to know that what we're looking at here is fundamental ideological change on the part of the Labour Party. It is no longer committed to the common ownership of the means of production. I don't really know what this means. Nobody really cares what it meant, but it didn't mean they were going to renationalise everything. Right. I'm going to stop there. We're going to come back with the next presentation. That's going to be a bigger dive into media, and I'll see you there. In the meantime, here's a little more White Town. Marxism. See, you thought I just made this up.